Well, welcome back, everyone. You might recall, recently Mayor Jepsen was on for an interview, and she said something in passing that we cycled back on after the interview. She mentioned that June 5th to June 8th, at Skidmore College, there was going to be a women's veterans retreat. And it really hooked us, and we thought we want to find out who's behind this and exactly what this retreat is about. So joining me today is Kate Dolstead. I did it.
You did
I got it right.
You got it right.
Yay. Yeah. Who is a co-founder with her husband of Soldier's Heart. So first, welcome.
Thank you very
to
much,
Look
Jeff.
TV.
Nice to be
Welcome
here.
to Saratoga. And for our viewers, everyone understands veterans. Most people understand women veterans. Give us just a bit of a background on Soldier's Heart.
Alrighty. Well, in 2005, my husband and partner, Ed Tick, wrote a book called War and the Soul. He had been working with veterans since just after the Vietnam War as a psychotherapist. And the book, when it came out, was much more successful than we had anticipated. And we started getting inundated with phone calls and emails from people looking for help. So we decided to create our nonprofit so that we could do this work full time. And not only answer the calls, but to create programs that would address the needs for large groups rather than one-on-one.
Sure, now we're talking about needs, and the needs vary as much as men and women vary, right?
Of course.
And you and your husband work with male veterans, men and women together, and women. And this particular one is for women, and as we discussed before we went on air tonight, very different issues.
Yes, yes. The women veterans have the same issues that their male counterparts have, really. Right. But they also have additional issues because they are women in the military.
Right.
And they're often one of only a very few women on their unit, unit, or on the bases. And so there's a lot of isolation. There's, of course, the issue of military sexual trauma, and that's rampant in the military, and so many of them come back with that additional burden. And it's not the same as sexual assault in the civilian world because you don't have the same avenues of reporting and having justice and that kind of thing take place. So oftentimes they have to serve side by side in a combat zone with someone who may have raped them.
Think about the burden and the stress of being in a combat zone. Now, you had mentioned to me there are moral, ethical, emotional, and spiritual needs.
Yeah.
That's pretty encompassing when you think about that. Right?
And I know there are a lot of good programs who are teaching coping mechanisms and how to manage daily life and that kind of things, and those are all really important. But what we focus on is, as you say, on these moral and ethical issues. There's a new term out now, I think it's called moral injury, and that's kind of the new buzzword, but it's true that when people go off to combat or even just into a military zone, oftentimes they have to do things or they see things that are really upsetting emotionally, but they've been trained to be the soldier and to be tough and to not let that in, but it does get in.
I bet it does get in. You know, you were saying before, your head is telling you one thing, and your heart is telling you something else. And I think the example that Kate gave me was riveting. You're in a convoy. Commanding officer says you cannot stop.
The safety,
child walks out into the middle of the road, and you can't stop.
That's right. Because the safety of the unit depends upon, or the convoy depends upon you keeping moving. Because if you stop, you could be a target.
That's exactly right.
And so your own safety and the safety of the whole people, everybody on that convoy, depends upon keep moving. So you have to do something that your head tells you you're supposed to do, but that your heart says is absolutely wrong, like running over a dog or a goat or even a child.
A child, and you know it's not the wrong decision. It's just that incredible moral struggle between what your head is telling you and what your heart is telling you.
Right.
Now, you said something about this retreat that stuck in my mind also. It's one thing when veterans, in this case women veterans, get together and talk about issues. They talk to each other.
Right.
That's an isolated chamber in a way, right? So you invite civilians in.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's an important step to have veterans talking to each other, or women veterans also talking to each other. That can be helpful, but it doesn't help them take that step into becoming integrated into greater society.
Yes, right.
And so if they can have civilians present who can hear the story and hear it in its fullness and in the context in which things took place, then those civilians can understand.
Sure.
And not only understand, but be willing to take some responsibility for having sent you to this war zone, regardless of how we might feel about a particular war. We as citizens have a military, and the military required this of these people. And if they can have civilians that are compassionately open-hearted and non-judgmental listen to that and help them carry that burden, then they're a long way toward being able to get home.
Sure, just the sense that someone's listened
Right.
to you, the
Right.
sense that they're contributing some information from outside that very limited sphere that they've been operating in.
Right.
And the other issue that you mentioned to me, which stuck to me, is that male soldiers have that attitude of, I've got your back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The brotherhood.
The brotherhood, which women serving in the military don't have.
That's right. Partly because they're so few in number, but also when they're in the war zone or in the military in general, there's a lot of competition among the women because they have to work twice as hard as the men to prove themselves, to get promoted and that kind of thing. And so there's often this competition as opposed to a sisterhood that
A
can
sisterhood
develop.
that the men would have naturally in kind of a brotherhood,
Right. So when they're out in a combat zone, they're really feeling isolated and like nobody's got their back, like they're all alone. And that is very psychologically damaging.
Boy, that's an understatement if
Yeah.
you think about it,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Well, the best of luck this weekend with this retreat. And boy, hats off to you and your husband and anyone that's involved in your organization for helping
Thank you so much.
our returning soldiers. And you may be saying to yourself, okay, it's not a golf tournament. I don't need to write a check for something. But I said to Kate, I said, what's the one thing that we want you to take away? And I thought the word was about as riveting as it gets. And you said, to listen.
Yeah. Listen
know,
to our vets, listen to our
listen
women
to
vets,
them.
believe them and believe their stories, and do it with an open heart.
I don't know what else to say. So that's great. Thank you very much for coming on.
Oh.
And best of luck over the weekend.
You're very welcome, Jess. Thanks so
Okay.
much.
See this interview again? Head to our website, looktvonline.com.